Hello, hello. Welcome everybody to Front's webinar here. We are going to just give folks a couple minutes to join, see that is happening, which is great. And yeah, we'll get started here in a moment. Again, for folks that have just joined, we're just giving the group a minute or so here to join, and we'll get started here in a moment. I'll pick out 10:02 as soon as the clock strikes. I'm in San Francisco, so time difference math. Let's go ahead and jump in. Hi, Joe. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well.
Excellent. Well, to everybody who's joined, thank you so much for coming. My name is Mike. I'm joined here by Joe. I'll do a better intro in a moment. Good morning. We are here for a webinar that we're really excited about how one unicorn startup elevated their customer experience, grew 10x, saved 500K. There's a lot to unpack there. So we're excited to do that. Before I jump into formal introductions, well, I'll do formal introductions and then a little bit of housekeeping before we really dig in. So I'm joined here today by Joe Emison, who's a CTO and co-founder at Branch Insurance, one of the fastest growing companies in the country. That's a bold statement, but I think it's pretty true. 10x is a lot. They just raised 147 million in funding a few months ago, now valued over $1 billion, the magical unicorn status. So a lot of exciting things. So Joe, anything to add to that?
No, that's great. It's good context.
Yeah. All right. And my name is Mike Hill, so I lead product marketing here for financial services at Front. And that's probably good for me. A couple housekeeping items. We can go to the next slide. There is a Q&A button at the bottom. If you click that, little prompt pops up and you can ask questions. We'll answer throughout. We'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end, so you're more than welcome to save them. After the webinar, we will share the recording. We'll also share the slides, and that hopefully gives you a chance to go back through and review all the amazing parts of the conversation that's about to happen. And then we also want input, so there'll be a couple polls mixed in here, so keep an eye out on your screen. Should be quick and easy, and just hopefully keep this a little bit interactive through that. With that, yeah, Joe, I again really appreciate you joining us today. Branch has been in the news a lot lately with the recent funding. And maybe before you kind of describe what Branch is, I wonder if you, as a founder, you probably have some unique insights. Maybe share a little bit of the backstory, where did the idea come from? How did the company get founded?
Yeah, my co-founder, Steve Lekis, the CEO of Branch, essentially spent 20 years building up the idea and understanding the need for Branch. So he started very low down at Allstate, worked his way up, went over to Esurance and built Esurance as homeowners product, then went to one of the largest data vendors, to home and auto carriers, insurance carriers in the US. And while he was there, through that multitude of experiences, he realized that there was this gaping hole in the market, which was people who own homes and own cars are the vast majority of the money that's spent on personal lines insurance in the US, and they're very terribly served. The system basically exists for people who shop insurance all the time, as opposed to people who buy and hold it for a long period of time, even though they pay most of the money in. And so Steve had, a number of epiphanies about, if we did this with data and we did these different things that insurance carriers don't do, we would serve this market better and provide a lower price to them. And so he reached out to me and asked if I knew any technical co-founders that he might find to do this with. This was like late 2016. And I had done a number of joint ventures with Steve over the years. And at that time, I would have jumped to work with him. This is my 6th startup. I love being a co-founder. This is my 4th time with a co-founder, and so my vision that I brought to this was I have a very much buy over build philosophy. Branch is entirely serverless. We use a lot of vendors. We do a lot of thinking about how we only can focus our building on things that make us unique. And so a huge part of my focus and my drive to do this was I am well suited for handling this is a known problem. This is to some extent a commodity. How do we deliver it more cheaply, more effectively, more efficiently?
That's amazing. And I'm realizing context would probably be helpful. This is a good chance. Give us your pitch. What is Branch?
Yeah, so Branch is an insurance company, and we're not just a broker. So we hold the risk. We pay the claims. We sell homeowners, auto, renters, and umbrella insurance, and we're adding more lines all the time. We are in 33 states in the U.S. right now, and we'll be in all 50 soon. And so, and again, there are a number of things that make us very special. The most obvious outward thing that makes us very special is if you go to branch.com and you put in your name and address and you're in one of the states that we're in, you will get a bindable price for home and auto immediately. Or you can buy just home or just auto. You don't have to buy them both. And you can buy it in a minute. And in fact, people have bought it in a minute. I think the fastest anyone's bought a home auto bundle from start is like 42 seconds. You can also buy umbrella. We're, as far as we know, the only carrier that will let you buy umbrella as well, just as a sort of click one button and add it. And the comparison out there with every other insurance company in the US is it'll take you at least 45 minutes, but probably more like 2 or 3 hours or days or weeks to buy that. And so the ease with which we can deliver that product, as well as some structural cost advantages, make us very attractive for partnerships and other ways that insurance is sold.
That's great. We just bought our first home, and I think it was definitely a couple days of back and forth, sharing information, filling out forms. There's some pain there. So clearly you're onto something. Well, excellent. And that's Branch, right? Not everybody on this call is in the insurance industry, or maybe even in the tech world. So I want to shift gears to think a common thread that we all share, which is something, caring about customer experience. Maybe you can just start, like, what is Branch's philosophy? How do you think about the customer experience you're trying to deliver?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are two parts of customer experience. One of them is it is important to meet customers, and we call them members. We have a particular way that everyone is sharing the risk together, really, in insurance. And so our member experience, we want to meet them where they are, right? If they want to communicate in a certain way with us, we want to communicate that way. But it's important to not take that to the nth degree. There's a separate aspect of this, especially within financial services, which is making sure that our members are knowing the full ramifications of the things they're asking for. And so when we think about customer experience, we think about doing everything we can tactically to be quick and efficient and delightful, but also to be thoughtful and not just an automatic sort of order taker for what comes in.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. And like, I think most customers probably come in thinking they know what they want and they're asking for something. Like, how do you find that balance with just sort of answering and responding versus like kind of going a level deeper?
Yeah, I think there are certain warning signs that we know of when we see somebody asking for someone, or someone who has an insurance set of insurance coverages that don't make a lot of sense. Like, you have a very expensive home, but you have very low limits on your auto liability. That's odd. And so we know when we're going to bring those up and have those conversations with you. We have a fantastic sales team, a fantastic member support team, trainers, and they develop, an enormous body of training and literature around what sort of issues we want to raise, and then when we'll flow through. And so, yeah, it's an ever evolving, based upon feedback that we get through reviews and surveys. We're constantly making adjustments.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, with so many, like, the training resources, that's huge. Obviously, like, when your agents get involved, they need to be able to provide that experience and offer something maybe the customers don't even know they want. But, like, with spending all that time and resources in this, like, I think the topic, I'll pose a question, but I actually want to open up a poll here, the first poll. So get ready, audience. Like, how the prompt is, right? How do you measure success for customer experience? There's, like, specific sort of common, scores and metrics out there that people use. Curious if some companies use a combination of the two. Maybe there's something else out there. If you have access to the chat and you mark other here, I'd love to know what you had in mind if you mark other. And then obviously, definitely folks out there who don't track this. And yeah, color commentary is always appreciated if you have any thoughts as to why you don't track it today. So we'll give folks a couple minutes. Joe, can you see the poll results?
I don't see the results. I just see the poll.
Oh, I think we'll share the results shortly. Okay, sorry.
Okay, great.
Yeah, it's a good, there's a comment from one person about developing a new product, right? So you haven't actually had the chance to measure success yet, which is a great point. I think we just shared the poll results. Joe, let me know if you can see it now.
I can, yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, so, okay, this is a great feedback. Kind of the CSAT, NPS are pretty common. One person used the CES, and then there's a few folks who use other scores. So maybe we can dig into the poll in a second, but, like, Joe, share your take. Like, how does Branch measure success? How do you know you're doing a good job with customer experience?
I mean, we do CSAT surveys. We set SLAs. A lot of what we do on our end is to decide ourselves what is a branch-like experience, and we're very responsive to negative reviews. So we monitor every negative review anywhere. Anytime you can get that negative feedback with details about what's going on, that's what would drive it. I mean, we have very short SLAs on getting back to people. Obviously, sometimes it can take longer to resolve an issue, and so I also think, to some extent, in insurance, a lot of people have very low expectations. And so our goal is not to meet those low expectations. Our goal is to define what we think is the right experience and what our members are owed. And so it's hard to be reductionist in, like, what a great customer experience is, because a lot of the requests are varied. But I do think responding quickly and meeting people in whatever channel they want to come into, and when they come into a particular channel, having all of the information that they've provided before, I think are table stakes for excellent experience.
Yeah, that's super helpful. And I actually want to unpack that sort of the channel conversation in a moment. Actually, super helpful question. I really appreciate somebody posed this. What is an SLA?
Service level agreement. So it is saying, if you text us, we will write you back within 1 business hour.
Yeah, and maybe this is a good segue, but how do you guys track that today?
We track that within Front. Front has wonderful SLA monitoring and guards, and lets you know when things are out of SLA. So you can know, hey, we haven't responded to this in the time that internally we've said we should.
Yeah, absolutely. that's also probably helpful context. So you guys have grown a ton in the last year, 10x. The common thread, like what brought us together here today, is that one of the decisions made in the last year was to adopt Front, which is something we appreciate. And so, Joe, maybe you can share for the audience, like, how would you describe Front, what it does, and how you use it?
Yeah, I mean, I think of Front as a shared inbox. I think that model is I mean, I've heard about Front for years, and so I had this vision of it as this shared inbox. I think it fits that model. I think the key part about Front that I didn't really realize until the past year is that it is truly omni-channel, and it is able to take every channel that you would send in, that you have any communication in, so in-app chat or SMS or email, and put them into inboxes so that from the member or customer side, it feels very seamless. But on the branch side, it's relatively simple to assign these tasks around and route requests in to the right skills-based handling of the request.
That's great. Yep, don't necessarily have anything to add to that. And I want to actually revisit a couple other sort of really good questions about the poll, and it obviously is all related. Can you define CSAT and NPS in your mind?
I mean, CSAT is just customer satisfaction, just a like, how satisfied were you with this interaction? NPS is Net Promoter Score. It was, I sort of think its heyday was 10 or 15 years ago. It's when you ask people if you would recommend the service to a friend as a way of giving people a safe space to say more negative things, maybe. There's also a common customer service question, which is, would you hire this customer service agent if you managed a customer service organization, which is kind of a sort of NPS adjacent type question. But I think I think you do these surveys, you measure, I think a lot of them kind of coalesce around the same thing. I mean, the reality is, really, either you solve someone's problem and you met their expectations, and when people's expectations are met or exceeded, they're happy. And when you don't meet their expectations, they're unhappy and angry. And so however you measure it, it kind of doesn't matter. That what you're trying to do is figure out, when you didn't meet someone's expectations, what was it? What could you have done differently to meet their expectations? Or maybe you should have set better expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys use that question you mentioned, though, right? The would you hire?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. Which is, I think, a really cool and creative way to phrase that. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you send the survey after every customer resolution. Is that right? Or is it every message?
No, it's after resolution.
Yeah, perfect. So that's a little insight. I think some folks were asking about the system, and it's pretty straightforward. A sort of poll is sent out after each resolution, and you get your score and track it over time. Please, these sorts of questions are really great. Keep them coming. So you mentioned what Front does, a sort of hub for shared inbox, sort of connecting channels together. Like, talk to us about the technology stack, like within customer facing teams. What else is Front connected to? Even if it's not connected to, like, what does the world of customer experience look like internally for technology?
Yeah, so we have a number of bespoke front-end applications and a mobile app that we embed communication with Front, especially the chat functionality. We use Twilio for our SMS. We have a short code, 230-230. You could also, instead of going to front.com, you could just text 230-230 like, hey, I'm interested in buying Branch, and you can have a conversation with someone there about purchase or about support. And we have a phone system currently with Five9, and in which we have some, we do some connectivity, and then we use Fivetran to pull all the data from Front and these other systems into our data lake, which is BigQuery, which allows us to do a bunch of queries and analysis on the combined aggregate data.
That's great. And maybe some folks aren't technical here, but any sort of advice, around technology to somebody who isn't necessarily at that level?
Um, I think we're in, well, maybe this is a little beyond on the technology side, but there are a lot of solutions that are point solutions on high touch communications. This is how we would also describe front as like our high touch, one-on-one high touch communication system. And there are a lot of solutions out there, but if you can't aggregate all of the communications together, you are going to be unhappy, because there's never anyone who just monolithically wants to communicate over one channel. And so a lot of what drove us to Front, and a lot of how we think about the technology integrations and the ways in which we need to use Front, involve get all the high touch communications within Front, and then also get all of that data out of Front so that it can be used in other systems. But because it's aggregated into Front, it is much simpler than if we were using like one system for chat and one system, like you have high touch chat, you could have a chat bot, you could have, separate SMS. I mean, it would be a mess. And so I guess one other technology piece of advice is, I think any system you're going to use today, you're going to want it to have a good API. Front's API is very simple and easy to understand, and also very powerful. And so that has been fantastic. And I think it's always good to vet and make sure you're actually getting an appropriate API with any of these products that you buy.
Yeah, that's a really good point, that like ecosystem is huge, because like nobody uses a tool in a silo anymore. And for those who don't know, API stands for Application Programming Interface. And it is basically how one system talks to another. And so asking about the API and the existing integrations that are sort of built out of the box, I think are great resources to think about in evaluating tools. There was a specific question, I think, about Front. I don't know if you know the answer to this, about how you resolve customer conversations. Are you using required tags, or how do you sort of ensure a conversation is like marked as resolved?
I think we have some of our team members in here. They can answer specifically. I know in some cases we don't. In some cases there's just like manual resolution. And I don't know if in any cases there's any sort of automatic resolution. I mean, in general, we view Front again as a high touch communication platform. So we're having a conversation, and we know when it's over, right? And so there isn't any, I don't think there's a real efficiency in being able to, like, just clicking that it's done. But here you can see Misty, who helped set up Front, said we do use force tags and dispositions. So yeah, so there's definitely a lot of routing as well.
Yeah, I'll just throw a quick shout out to Misty. We're big fans. So so that's a great point. And you mentioned before about chatbots, and Front being sort of this high touch platform. Like, what's your take on automation, deflection, versus like when you want to bring in a human to sort of have a conversation with a customer or a prospect?
Our view, at least today, is that if a customer wants to talk to us, we want to talk to our customer or member. And we're not interested. I mean, I think there's use in autoresponders to help people understand what self-service options are available. But we have enough staff. There's an expectation in the policy premium you're paying that you can get one-on-one help with your insurance policy in a financial services context. And so, we're happy to provide that. And, my experience with chatbots and experiments with chatbots have all been terrible. They haven't solved, they've been much clunkier ways of getting information than like just filling out a form, in my experience. And I generally speaking, when I am forced to use a chatbot, it's only slightly better than when I'm screaming at the IVR that asked me to just say what I want. And then of course, like, I have no idea what I'm talking about. And it's a lot worse than when it was just press 1 for something, I think.
So we're not facing a robot revolution?
I mean, no, the robots are very dumb.
No, we don't have anything to fear. Joe's a good source on this. All right. So Great. I want to come back to just so customer relationships, maybe so sort of how we think of front and where the value is. You've grown 10x in the last year. At the same time, you've actually been able to improve customer experience. I think the specific score, CSAT score, went from 85% to 90% within 6 months of adopting front, which sounds very great and exciting. I think there was also a stat that said you reduced response times by 75%, which might feel a little bit more real. Down to like 1.4 hours was like the average SLA where you were hitting now. So some exciting stats. Like, anything else you want to comment on about how you achieved that? And like, while growing 10x, I think most companies, things tend to break when you grow fast. They don't get better. So yeah, any thoughts on that?
We were lucky that as we were growing, we were hiring and doing, effective training. And so we were bringing an appropriate number of people to the problem. I think the setup within front, and Misty can add in the chat any other thoughts she has on this too. But
Misty, we should have had you up here. Sorry.
Yeah, we should have. The adoption and the process with Front's customer success team enabled us to set up Front in a way that made it much easier for us to identify things like SLA violations. And we've iterated on how the configuration has worked, but there is, and I ultimately get some escalations that I have to deal with in Front. And I'll tell you that working in Front versus other systems just feels like a lighter weight experience. I feel faster. I feel much more capable of being able to handle things. Some of that is just, it's just there instead of having to click and open up screens and, mess around with drop downs. There's just a lot faster user experience when you're managing those. And I think that the inbox model and the way that works, as opposed to sort of, it's like a database that you have to filter down, I think also has a meaningful impact on how quickly you can respond to things.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think the iteration is key. Like, just because you implement something and it gets used, impact comes from learning and being methodical about that. How do you did you have someone kind of manage that iterative process and the implementation and sort of driving that part of it?
Yes. Yeah. Initially, Misty managed all of that, and it's now managed by a woman named Karen Blanton, who is over that entire process. And I do think you need that project manager, and you need to work with customer success. I actually think Front, we wouldn't have achieved the success we have had with Front without Front's fantastic customer success. And I think that's just true with vendors in general, especially when it's these to some extent there's complexity in the workflow, and you want to be able to say, this is who we have, this is what's coming in the door, how should we use the system, or what are the experiments we should test to see how we might organize things and route things. And without Front's customer success, we wouldn't have achieved what we have been able to do.
That's great. And there's a few folks asking questions. I think some are available to everybody to see, but there are a lot about tags and automation within chat. And I think this is a really, really good feedback, and perhaps something we could follow up with a webinar that's a little bit more detailed and different. So I just want to be I don't want people to feel like we're not able to answer all these detailed questions here, because there's obviously a lot of depth to the product side of this. But to sort of step onto the other side of the house, I think we've been talking a lot about customer experience, customer support, member support. You mentioned your sales team also uses Front. How do you think about measuring the experience for prospects, the buying experience, improving, let's call it win rate, or bounding, I think is the insurance term, binding of a policy?
Yes. Yep.
Using some lingo.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to be able to use the same system everywhere, because those communications follow through, right? I mean, you want to know what were the series of communications, and there's also in some cases a level of handoff that is, okay, well, this is who's going to be taking care of you now. And so it really doesn't make any sense, at least in my view, to use a different system on the sales side than on the support side. And so it was a very easy call that we wanted to do that.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense to get teams in sync. It kind of creates a really seamless customer experience throughout, being on the same platform. So the other side of the coin, we were talking a little bit about customer relationships, the impact on the business. Like, what about internal efficiency? So I think there was a stat we published. So while growing 10x, I think the math was like something like 40% more efficient. The same team members were able to respond to 40% more customers, was the stat we measured. But like, any other comments on efficiency internally, and some workflows or things that helped the team sort of just get more done, respond to more customers, and as you grew?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that drove us to front, I mean, the initial reason why we said the solution we have isn't good enough is we do programmatic emails and programmatic text messages and programmatic in-app notifications. So, it's 2 days before we're going to bill you. We send you a text message, we send you an email, we send you a notification. And all of those are an opportunity for high touch communication, and we welcome them. And so with the system we had, you get an email, you write back, it goes into a support queue. That's great. In-app notification pops up, there's a little support window, you can do something. Text message, the system we had, if you reply to the text message, just, it went back to Twilio. So we were using a system to send the message through Twilio, and then it got dropped. And so people would write back and we couldn't hear them. There was no way to connect them. And so Front was the only omni-channel communication platform that allowed us to send our programmatic emails through our shortcode through Twilio. And when somebody replied, created a conversation in Front, high-touch communications that we could start having communications with. And that is a game changer in terms of how you think about customer communication. Increasingly, people like to communicate via text. It's actually very simple. If you save, 230 as branch in your phone, you just find it's a lot easier to do that. And so when we were able to implement that had enormous efficiency gains just in terms of being able to communicate through SMS effectively. Additionally, we were able, the way that the email routing worked in the system we were using was just not nearly as effective as the way Front integrates with Google Workspace. And so that also had a really significant impact in routing, as well as, and this was especially true on the sales team, in Front, you can see your Google Workspace inbox, right? So if you are someone who is working conversations within Front, there's your email, there's all the other conversations. And we were able to move a lot of conversations that were an individual email into Front much more easily. And so suddenly now we had, if somebody left or if someone was on vacation, we were able to pick up these conversations that had been in personal email. And so all of those things were massively efficient versus like we have to go into this web interface and then go to our email and, back and forth, and where is all this information?
That's super helpful. Front is super cool. I'm biased, obviously. Stephanie raises a really good question. Like, all of the efficiency and the amazing things you've done, we're not going to attribute it all to Front. Maybe you can share what are some other things that have happened over the last 6 months that have contributed to efficiency, things in training, day-to-day, even other systems, right? This is an ecosystem we want to be a part of.
Sure. I think that most of the things that we did were in concert with Front, right? So it was like Front enabled us, and through Front's customer success team and through what Front is able to do, enabled us to build more efficient flows and more effective flows for information. We continue to iterate. I mean, we have we have a bunch of cultural roots that define how we think about tackling problems. One of them is called "This is V1." We even today, continually, deciding, okay, let's change the way we're processing these things. Let's change the way we review quality within teams. But all of these things are very possible and easier, either the same or easier than in the prior system we were using with Front. We also, continue to do some level of automation and other things like that. But for this particular case study, we didn't actually include any real gains through automation per se.
So the case study, I'm glad you brought that up. If anyone's interested in sort of reading about Joe and Branch's story, it's a Front Branch customer story. If you Google that, it should pop right up. But we published just a few weeks ago. And one of the headlines of it was 482% ROI. A big number, very exciting. We were excited, obviously, but how do you think about evaluating decisions that you made? Your decision to use Front wasn't measured and calculated to that extent when you first adopted it. Valuing ROI, what do you make of that number?
Yeah, every time a vendor pitches us on this is the ROI, my answer is always, okay, we'll write it in the contract, and if we don't achieve it, don't make me pay. And the answer is always, well, no, that's not how it works. I'm like, okay, well, I don't believe you. The decisions that we make generally are based around, again, we have a very strong vision at Branch. So if you went back and looked at the very first pitch deck that we ever had, and you look at what we do today, it is very similar. There haven't been pivots, oh, we thought this, but we were wrong. So we have very strong opinions about this is how it should work. This is what this experience should be like. And the decision to choose Front was very much around the experience we deliver today, especially around SMS, is just not Branch-like. It's not what it needs to be. And Front enabled us to deliver that experience. And then obviously we did our due diligence and looked at a number of, we did essentially sort of a trial period with Front, spent time with customer success, and validated that in fact, it would work, and all of these things were correct. And I certainly felt confident along the way. We will be better off. And in the end, if you effectively use software as a service solutions like Front and you use them in the way that they're intended to be, you get more than you pay for them. They just enable more. And so I tend not to worry about that part of it because we have such a strong vision of what we're trying to achieve. And a lot of times it is the case that there's only one vendor that we find that can actually give us and help us get to that experience.
Yeah, that's great. And I know, I think we all wish maybe we could value every decision and know that we got more than what we paid. I'll just ask point blank, do you feel like the 482% is realistic?
Yeah. I think that especially if you think I've got all these communication mechanisms that I'm trying to allow my customer base to talk to me with, and the one that is probably the most compelling is totally broken, yes, there's massive return in making that work correctly.
What were you guys using before Front? What was the situation there?
We were using Zendesk.
Yeah, and I think we don't need to unpack that, but I guess that's just good to throw in so there's context. I want to address a question that somebody just asked, cultural problem solving, which is a great segue into another bucket of value, happy team members. Branch is ranked, and you mentioned that as well on Glassdoor, right? So Glassdoor is reviews. We're not paying for this ranking. They are the 13th best employer in the country, which is super exciting. So hopefully you've got some advice here on how to create an amazing experience for team members. What advice do you have there?
So this is my 6th company that I've started, and I started a number with no intentional culture. And it just becomes sort of a reflection of the founders and the more visible people in the organization. Steve and I, in founding Branch, wanted to be very intentional about culture, and we actually, like, with our seed round, we actually went through a full branding exercise, and as part of that, started articulating what does it mean to be Branch-like in all aspects of things, and including internally and culturally. So we have these roots that talk about how we work with each other and how we build and how we think about treating people, and we do a lot of things around them to try to reinforce them. We try to make sure the roots are things that people actually say, because you get a lot of companies with cultural principles and they're there and nobody ever says them and they don't actually come up a lot. So, you will get, and then we recognize wins of the week in which we reinforce like what cultural roots these embrace. We have a Brancher of the Month, which you can see on LinkedIn, which again talks about the cultural roots that this Brancher embodied. And we do a lot of, we have a big company event where we bring everyone in called Branch Fest. A lot of that has content around the roots, just to help everyone align with, this is who we are, this is how we act, this is how we treat everyone. And for the last year, we have actually had brand and people managed by the same person. So actually all of people operations and all of marketing rolls up to one person who's the head of culture and brand. And that the goal of that was to really align what are we doing internally and how are we treating internally. It should be the same as how we're treating people externally. And I think that largely has worked as a way of, because you have a lot of companies, I think, where they say we want to treat customers in this way, but the company treats its employees very poorly. And so I think it's very hard to be treated poorly, especially if all day you're answering customer questions. If you're being treated poorly, I think it's hard for you to provide an excellent experience outward in that case.
Yeah, that's an important component. We were talking about customer service earlier, and a lot of it, even if you can bring a team member in, like then it's in their hands. So their happiness is key. And you guys have how many like customer facing employees at Branch?
Within member support, I think we're at around 80. I'm sort of a similar number on the sales side.
How big is the company now?
We're at around 450 employees.
That's amazing. That's a pretty big portion. I think Front has something maybe a little bit smaller than that in terms of ratio, but like that's clearly an investment in customer experience, and it's obvious you prioritize that. I did something fun. I went on Glassdoor and pulled, I was just sort of looking through some of the reviews, looking for some interesting tidbits. I wonder if you can comment on one of these quotes. They're all positive, by the way. There's a really refreshing level of communication and lack of barriers between departments and teams. How have you achieved that? This is a quote. I don't have the title of the person, but yeah, someone on your team.
So one of our roots is ask why, and we try to model this and have these conversations. I think a lot of it is just inviting people to ask questions, answering questions, and reinforcing, again, through all the things we do, you should ask why, you should, like that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that definitely prompts the like natural collaboration and like trying to problem solve and answer the why, if that makes sense. By the way, let's go ahead and pause. I want to sort of formally open it up to Q&A. So we can continue the conversation, but folks will be paying special attention to audience questions at this point. And if there are none, that's okay too. But Mark, if you want to pull up the last slide as well, it's probably helpful. But yeah, so one other quote I saw, this is more obvious. Branch is focused on making the insurance experience the best it can be for our members, which is super inspiring. Any comments on that?
I mean, thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, it's clear things are going really well. One question, and I don't see any coming in unless I'm crazy. That's fine. So one question that I had around trends of like what's changing, maybe an obvious one like channels. You mentioned SMS, like people are texting more. Like in the last couple of years, what have you seen? What are some shifts in this sort of customer experience world?
I do think that SMS and things like Apple Business Chat, although realistically, I think SMS is better. It just tends to work better and less limited. I think that we have seen this trend away from chatbots because they don't work very well, and so I think live chat and live synchronous chat people really like. And people don't like talking on the phone. So, I mean, or like increasingly more and more, higher and higher percentage of people don't like talking on the phone. So I think those are there. You know, email is always going to be there, but both SMS and the in-app chat have an immediacy that, and an expectation of response that, you know, you feel like you should be able to get, you know, an answer more quickly. And sometimes that's what you want. And so I think we're seeing people self-select into certain communication channels for different types of requests.
And there was a question in the Q&A, which is appreciated from Brent. So how do you engage customers throughout the year? Do you use Front for text marketing?
We
sort of
do
what's
not.
Front?
So Front is only high touch communication. So we use Customer IO, which is a programmatic email platform for in response to events, you run campaigns. And then Front, and if you ever reply to any one of those emails, it starts a high touch communication, a conversation in Front. That's the general strategy that we have everywhere, which is like constantly sending out programmatic emails in response to events. Again, we're going to bill you, or we have an offer for you, or we need to get you to sign something, whatever it is. Those are going out all the time based upon an event stream data. And then at any time you can reply in whatever context, again, in the app, via SMS, via email, and then boom, you're in a high touch communication with a person who can help you out. And I think that's the best experience you can get today.
Yeah, that's great. And it's this like perfect combination of automation and like, you know, driving the business forward with outbound, but like having the high touch and being able to feed things in. It's really great. Another question, and I think you'll appreciate this one, back to like what makes Front special. Like you can clarify, like what's the differentiator for the branch experience versus calling like an insurance company directly or like a broker?
You know, so branch actually works with a lot of independent agencies. And so you can call an independent agency and get a branch-like experience. You know, the thing that really, so there is this wonderful ability that we send these programmatic communications and then we can jump you into high-touch communication and we have great SLAs, so we're talking to you quickly. But underlying all that is a system and a really unique way of doing insurance that nobody else does. And so, and this is this difference of you can go from zero to having a home, auto, and umbrella policy in like a minute, and anybody else probably it's weeks. And if you want to hang out on the phone while all that happens, it's hours. And so I'll give you another anecdote. I know that we hear these stories all the time from customers, but you know, well, my carrier told me I needed to make this change, so I called them up and they said it would take an hour on the phone. So I hung up and I called branch and I had all my stuff moved over from branch there, all of those issues fixed in 5 minutes. Or, you know, I bought a new car and I called up my insurer and they said it was gonna take 30 minutes to like add the car and drop the old car. And so I just went with, you know, branch is like a minute or two. And you can do it via SMS, via email, however you want to do it. And so, but those, you know, Front is great, but what is really special about branch is the underlying proprietary technology that branch has built and the insurance products that branch has filed that enable that kind of incredibly rapid financial services work in insurance that other carriers just can't do, and that agents who aren't selling branch can't do because they're restricted by the underlying carrier they're using.
That's awesome. Yeah, this is definitely a plug. Go check out Branch. Consider them for all your insurance, home and auto, and bundling needs. So maybe there's one last poll we're launching. It's really, just if you're interested in chatting with Front, or how we can help you with your situation, or if whether you're a customer currently or want to explore, learn more, we're happy to chat. If you don't know who your account manager is today, you can email me. I'm happy to connect you as well if you're a current customer. Last thing I'll mention, again, the Branch customer story is online. If you just Google Branch and Front, you can read more about Joe's story. If you're interested more in the sort of ROI topic and evaluating decisions, there's a Forrester report we're really excited that's launching in the next week that talks through sort of the ROI model and the value of Front. But in general, I think is just really interesting to think about how to value decisions and where the costs and things actually come from, sort of a very detailed study. Joe, any final thoughts to share with the group? This has been amazing, but I just want to give you one last spot on the floor.
Yeah, I think in general, there is a modern way of buying vendor services that is a little bit of like a best of breed scenario. So for example, with Front, we're using Front, but Twilio is what's doing the SMS communication. So Front is really great at being this global inbox, high touch communication, routing things, SLAs, but it's too much in my view to say, hey, Front, also, I want you to operate like an SMS gateway. Like really effectively. And I want you to negotiate, figure out how to get short codes, negotiate with like AT&T and Verizon and everything. Do all that too. It's too much work and the product's going to be mediocre. And so in my view, all of the modern stacks that we'll have within companies, what will win is where you've got a well-defined, essentially sort of easy to describe, this company does this thing for me, and it integrates with all these other companies that are great at what they do in order to deliver what we need. And that is something that there are a lot of companies that don't get that, and they try to be everything to everyone. And I firmly believe that companies that really understand we're great at this and we partner with great companies for other things, that is the winning strategy. So I think if you're comparing one of those to another, you're much better off with these contained solutions that play well with partners.
That's a great point. And yeah, there's a lot of really good advice here. Hopefully it was valuable for everybody. Ecosystem is a big takeaway. Joe, thank you again so much for your time. It's been a real pleasure. And we'll, I think, go ahead and sign off now. Thank you everybody for attending, and we'll see you next time.
That's right. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Have a good one. Bye all.